Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, no, that's rude. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio lunchtime talk. These talks are live every Friday at 1 p.m, both here in the building and live online, so whether you're in Bristol or far away, you can join in the conversation. My name is Lawatim, I'm the studio coordinator here. I'm a black man in my early 30s, wearing all black and big, thick glasses. Every Friday, we open the doors of the Pervasive Media Studio for Open Studio Friday, where we offer you the chance to spend time in the space by hot desking alongside our residents and staff from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Is there anyone here who's new to the studio? New people? Hey, welcome. In case you don't know, the Pervasive Media Studio is a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology with everything from comedy to coding and product development to performance art. It's a partnership between Watershed, UWE Bristol and the University of Bristol and funded by Arts Council England. And we offer studio space, desk space, meeting rooms, events and opportunities to our residents as part of our spirit of generosity and mutual exchange. We're a space for people to take risks with embryonic ideas and to make time for collaboration. So feel free to move around, make a cup of tea in the kitchen back there, grab a glass of water, etc. We have a quiet space just to my left, to your right, just around the corner if you need to take a break at any point. Fire exits are at either end of the studio. One of the studio team, probably me, in the pink lanyard, will escort you out if there's a fire drill, which we're not planning today, so assume that it's burning, assume that it's real. Accessible toilets and baby change can be found in the corridor just next to the kitchen. There will be a Q&A at the end of the talk if you want to ask questions. For those of you watching online, we have a mic in the room which will be spoken to by Emma, who has any questions, who will read your questions, doesn't have questions. And yeah, if you're in the building, just raise your hand and I'll bring the mic to you. You can get news on all our future talks by heading to watershed.co.uk/studio, at Pervasive Media Studio, at mastodon.social on Mastodon, at pmstudio.bluesky.bsky.social on Blue Sky, and at Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram. Did you get all that? So I'm going to hand over to Mandy, who's going to introduce our speaker, Jaz, for today.
Okay, part two of the opening section. So I'm Mandy Rose. I'm a professor of documentary and digital cultures at UWE Bristol, and I'm part of the studio executive board for UWE. So yes, I'm here to introduce Jaz. Jaz Hee-jeong Choi, associate professor in Civic Interaction Design at the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. Jaz is co-investigator. Is that how you call it on this project? Yeah, something. Yeah, one of the leads on the Awful Change project that explores immersive art for societal transformation, which we're going to hear about today. And just a little bit on Jaz's background. Prior to joining the Civic Interaction Design Lab, Jaz was, among other things, director of the Careful Design Lab at RMIT in Melbourne, Australia, and co-led the EU Horizon 2020 project, Creative Practices for Transformational Futures. I would check that out online. There's lots of wonderful films that came out of that project, among other things. So Jaz came to Bristol to take part in a workshop we ran yesterday that brought creative practitioners and researchers together to explore the increasing use of multi-sensory registers in creative work. There wasn't time yesterday to hear more about Awful Change, so I'm really looking forward to the chance to hear more about the project now. And yeah, as Lawatim said, please hold your questions, don't let them go. Hold on to them to ask at the end, and people online, please also post your questions in the chat. So welcome, Jaz. It's great to have you here in Bristol.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's really wonderful to continue the conversation from yesterday at the summit. And thank you again, Mandy, Tom, and MyWorld team, and also obviously where we are now. Where are we? Immersive. Pervasive, not even immersive. Pervasive Media Studio, which is a wonderful space, actually. So let's do it. So today we'll have a closer look at our project that Mandy mentioned, All in Immersive Art for Societal Transformation, but highlighting collectivity and early insights from our pilot project. So why don't we start with awe? And humans have been captivated by awe for eons, actually. Awe and other similar states like the sublime, wonder, frisson, music, reverie, all of this. Over the past decade, though, there's an exponential growth in psychology, especially around awe. which defines it as sort of a complex transformative emotion between pleasure and fear. It's very complex and complicated, isn't it, like all of us? But it's elicited when we encounter vastness, something far greater than we are in many, many different forms. And that really challenges us or making sense of the world. In the process, self diminishes, recalibrating our relationship with ourselves, others, and the world in general. So, in essence then, awe is actually about us changing through unlearning and relearning, as simple as that. And we've all experienced awe through nature, music, visual art, moral beauty, like when you see somebody doing something really courageous and helpful for somebody else. Collective effervescence, like dancing together. It's Friday night. Not night yet. Okay, so I'm dancing in my head already. Collective effervescence. Oh, that's what I said, and I just keep repeating, don't I? It is Friday. Epiphanies, like big ideas. Can you actually hear me at the back? Great. Not really. Okay, so I'll speak up. Yesterday I heard the feedback. I couldn't hear you at all. Nice slides was the feedback. So epiphanies, like big ideas, spirituality and life and death. It's really frequent during childhood. Think about children and babies, their face is always like, you know, in awe. But then it really diminishes during adolescence. It's quite sad. And only resurfacing towards the end of the life as we reflect on the life's finitude, really. And it is really such a shame, I think, because awe can enhance our mental, physiological, and emotional well-being, promoting creativity, critical thinking, generosity, really making us much more pro-social. And it's a really deeply personal experience, this awe, but really could orient us towards pluralism and common good. Wow, snake oil, don't you think? But you're supposed to laugh at this, but that's okay. And you know, immersive art offers such a particular and amazing opportunities to inspire awe, but with caution. Because really, firstly, awe is not always positive by default. Awe could induce a fear and really antisocial behaviors. Trump. Okay, nobody laughed again. We'll continue. And research into awe is really growing fast, but limited. So actually, things like imaging and sensor technologies allow us to see or understand awe experiences in many different new ways, like neural imaging and how different areas of our brain get activated, or, you know, piloerection, like goosebumps, and we can detect this, or facial expressions. But really, these things usually lack really rich contextual information, like, you know, social cultural differences. We can remember how, I don't know if it's still the case, but all the sort of digital cameras would see my face, this Asian face with Asian eyes. So, oh no, you got your eyes closed. Yeah, but it really happened, right? And also long-term studies are lacking. Most studies do tend to focus on short-term effect of already predefined form of awe as a stimulus, and how individuals' perception and behavior changes as a result. It's quite limited, isn't it? So we really need to take a layered, multidimensional approach to awe in immersive art, I think, because each encounter shapes differently, varying by other bodies, warm or not, spatial, temporal, and other contexts. And complexity is crucial in the ongoing discussions about this festivalization or spectacularization of immersive art within the so-called attention and experience economy, which reduces art experiences to a quick emotional stimuli. And we don't want that. And understanding its broader and long-term transformational impact is also crucial, obviously. Rejecting simplistic cause and effect kind of narratives, and instead taking into account massive entanglements over different time and space. So to this end, this is the Creatures project. We build on our previous Horizon project called Creatures, Creative Practices for Transformational Futures. So together with 11 consortium members, including universities, creative practitioners, cultural organizations, and NGOs across Europe, UK was part of it, sort of at the start. We try to address the problem that art and design are already playing such an important role in eco-social transformation, but they're heavily under-recognized. And they're often fragmented, our understanding, and poorly resourced and badly understood. So we examined 140 transformative creative projects driven by aspirations to bring about eco-social change. An example would be Microbiont. I don't know if anyone's heard of this project. Okay, it's a very good example of transformative creative practice. This collaborative project was led by Kersnikova Institute in Slovenia, which involved a series of public workshops where people learned from scientific and artistic perspectives about various related matters like mycelium, senses, sound art. And through this process, they co-created an orb, a living ecosystem of fungi, technologies, and locally sourced biomaterials, which might include the artist's spit or saliva, and also from the site itself, like soil from surrounding areas. And living artwork, it continues living actually, and it becomes a collaborator for things like music performances through senses. So what happened then was the shifting anthropocentric worldviews through all these processes over time, reshaping how participants and audiences understand their relationship to living systems and technologies in many different entangled ways at different points of the work's conception, development, implementation, and afterlife. So transformative impact or transformational impact is quite varied and long-term. So we commissioned similar and often co-developed 20 experimental productions of various kinds and scales. So we had Commons Poly, not Monopoly, it's a board game based on Commons philosophy, as well as life-size of immersive installations at an international biennial, for instance, and facilitated diverse engagement activities around these experimental productions, such as participatory workshops, panels, exhibitions, experimental walks, picnics, all sorts of things. On and offline. We did have COVID in the middle as well. And central to Creatures then was that research and practice are not separated in the form of the observer and the observed, but fundamentally entangled. There's even paper about that. Sorry. Isn't it great? I think so. And here, the authorship is never singular, and impact is not some kind of an end goal that we all strive for through 3 years, but an ongoing collaboration or collaborative effort. And really, everyone's changing in different ways towards collective change through the process. And we all know this. I'm not talking, gibberish here. We all know this is how change happens in real life. But we were trying to do that within the project scope with an intention. And I think that made a difference for us. So during Creatures, we interviewed 20 plus, I think in the end 27, creative practitioners involved in immersive art who highlighted that there's an increasing desire to bring about societal change through creative practices, which demands transdisciplinary, cross-sectoral, and more than human collaborations, leading to new embodied, multisensory, and immersive art forms. And there are many problems and challenges, 3 of which we are trying to address in our project, and they all operate at a different scale. First, they really struggle with the lack of conceptual and methodological frames around, especially around the substantiating immersive arts potential, transformative potential and impact, but really from the beginning, even potential, what it might be able to do. And it really still, we suffer from the common misconception that really pays so much attention about the technological spectacle aspect of all of these immersive artworks. So we build on awe to address this. Secondly, here, they call for new systemic evaluation approaches. Evaluation is such a scary word these days, isn't it? And we're still looking at audience numbers. It's wrong, it's not helpful, yet we're still doing it, so in the middle of it all the time. Frankly, really useless. No, it's not useless, but it's not as helpful as we might think. So in response, we explore cultural mediation as an arts-based or overarching approach to arts-driven transformation. It's a practice that facilitates co-creation of shared vision and actions amongst diverse stakeholders, which has been gaining traction, especially in governance and cultural sectors across Europe in recent years. At the nexus of these two is what we call engagement design. In between the awe experience of immersive design and systemic change through cultural mediation. So there's a huge area to cover there, right? And this could include things like workshops, educational programs, digital platforms that could really help us extend this awe experience or immediate artistic encounter so that transformative impact could be extended and amplified in different ways. And doing this takes an amalgam of expertise, really. Things like even curation, research, mediation, pedagogy, but there's a lack of language to describe this. So it is heavily unrecognized and unsupported. So in our current inquiry, guided by this question, we try to address these three interconnected issues: the uniqueness of immersive art, importance of engagement design, and the centrality of art and culture in systemic transformation. And to do this, we bring together different knowledge and practices within our consortium. These are the core sort of members of the consortium, ranging from art and design to humanities and psychology, together with industry partners who develop and curate immersive art, including ITFA Doc Lab in Amsterdam, who works a lot with sort of VR, XR, domes, and also installations. And Opera Forward Festival, also in Amsterdam, with experimental operas like The Codes, which involved over 170 young performers. It's massive. And we also have additional collaborations with other organizations like Haus der Kunst in Munich and Tate Modern in London, which allowed us to engage with Shuli Chang's immersive works as case studies, enriching our perspectives and methodological possibilities within our very small pilot project. So for example, Kiss Kiss Kill Kill at Haus der Kunst is not, I don't know if you can all read it, it's not a retrospective exhibition, but a, where are we? Survey exhibition, sort of showing the revised or updated works of Shuli Chang. And these relations between these works create really unique multisensory and immersive experiences. As you can see, all very different forms, and there's smells, and there's AI going on, and all sorts of things happening in across different rooms that are interconnected. This is an example. This is room 2, where reassembling waste, in this case keycaps, trigger audio responses in children's voice, reflecting image-based AI's classification of certain works as dangerous. They're often related to sexuality or human voice. And these children's voices were recorded with their, obviously, parents and guardians' permission. They're real voices, not AI. And to support this, a range of engagement activities were implemented, like the wall text explaining it, hands-on workshops, lecture by Shuli at a local university, and a themed cocktail at the venue's bar, and our research, including the audience questionnaire at the entry, which really formed a part of the evolving engagement ecology. It wasn't a separate thing. We also consider broader dimensions of practice. We observe how Shuli's dedication to open source technologies sometimes generate friction, pretty often, within conventional museum infrastructures that does not readily support non-proprietary technologies. so it's broken. And it's not like there's always somebody available to fix this, because it's not a usual infrastructural element in museum settings like this. And that raises questions and should raise questions. And the second one is Hage Dreaming at Tate Modern, a techno-fantasia guided theater, as Shuli calls it, co-created by Shuli Chang and Don Don Hoon, artist and practicing shaman from Turku tribe in Taiwan. It tells a story about a hunter who falls asleep in the forest while sheltering from a downpour. In her dream, the hunter's dreams, she meets a group of non-binary spiritual beings called Hage, who pass on ancestral knowledge of living, weaving, and hunting on Turku pictures, based on Turku people's Gaia living principle, which is inherently relational. And these are the formal engagement design outcomes. There are many informal ones, of course, and that included the playbill, which required considerable additional effort to produce, something we'll come back to very shortly. As with Kiss Kiss, we also had online audience questionnaires in the mix. So by integrating diverse disciplinary views and methods, for example, questionnaires and interviews, as I mentioned, to ethnographic, co-creative, and experimental approaches. I won't go into details, but you'll have a glimpse of it. We are trying to form a small yet nuanced and coherent perspective. And this is not to form a definitive narrative of what's happening with or in immersive art for societal transformation, but instead, really, we're seeing it as an early exploration, an entry point to better navigate the complex, evolving entanglements we hope to explore after this pilot project with more partners and collaborators. So with this understanding, let's look at some of the emerging themes from our work so far. When we asked broadly about experiences of awe in everyday life, responses were varied, with nature consistently emerging as the predominant theme. There's no surprise there. Artistic experiences also featured prominently, and with some notable emphasis on immersive art, which I think is really interesting. And when it comes to immersive art encounters, people identified contrasts and juxtapositions, for example, between natural and artificial, presence and absence, or tangible and conceptual, as primary triggers of awe. We can see this in these comments about Hage Dreaming, where ostensibly immaterial elements like laser, spatialized sound, and body movements materialized new sensuous, affective forms, people interpreted in different ways. And that's a bit abstract, so let's actually look at the snippet of that section that people are referring to. So from darkness, suddenly these lasers appear, creating this space. And this is the moment when the hunter meets Hage beings and learning about weaving, which is so central to Gaia living principle. The sound is both recorded and live. And this is when the hunter really gets it, obviously. This affects me every time I watch it, really. So let's just go back to the comments. Now, if you read them, it sort of makes sense, doesn't it? And some people saw it as a harp, as weaving, or as spaces. Different interpretations, but really pointing at the same thing. I won't watch it again, although I'd like to. So, another interesting thing is while awe is often framed mostly in sensory affective terms, immersive art seems to solicit an intellect as insistently as those, as these comments actually show. So I'll give you a couple of minutes, no, 1 minute to read. What's really important here, I don't know if you noticed, is when. The timing. When that conceptual work can unfold. And there's a huge difference between exhibition setting and performance setting in this case. So if you read carefully, we can see that the first comment about Hage dreaming, it really suggests the meaning making occurred in retrospect, after the performance, because performance really requires you to be there, present, immersed completely through senses. And by contrast, the second comment about Kiss Kiss, the thinking actually happened in situ, yeah, while your body is there, enabled by the open-ended tempo of the exhibition environment where you can control your own pace of engagement. And I think this is something that we can really play with and should think more about. And some other general things, audience motivations varied widely as in why they would come and see. These works primarily influenced by the familiarity with the venue or the artist. More work to be done there, obviously. And very interestingly, people usually arrived with minimal prior research about what they're about to see. They had no idea. They just kind of turned up. But they could really articulate clear, diverse intentions for change post-experience. Something interesting. I'm not trying to explain anything. As I said, this is preliminary insights, but I think there's something really interesting going on that we can think about. And one aspect, though, that really calls for our attention, I think, is that there are genuine efforts being made to do impactful engagement or engagement design, but the lack of recognition leads to really unexplored or underexplored opportunities. This is illustrated in the comment made by the engagement and learning manager at Haus der Kunst. So they're really trying in their own ways to broaden the reach, but sometimes this is quite ad hoc. There's no concerted or collaborative effort to do this. And this is a comment by the curator of Hage Dreaming about the playbill, as I mentioned before. She put in a lot of effort, extra effort, to create this playbill, which may not be so necessary for other performance work, at Tate or otherwise, in order to create an entry point for the audience to really engage with deeper and underlying issues. What's really important, actually, not just about the piece, but all the performance and the societal issues it's trying to address, like the continued ongoing struggles that Turku tribe are facing, like land rights, and really ongoing oppressions through history till today. Everyone across institutions, practitioners, and audiences, everybody wants more engagement. But it currently depends on the individual commitments. Again, like with a lot of artistic endeavors. We're so familiar with this, but we can and we should advocate for change in this space, I think. And let us look at this comment made by an audience member, especially where it's highlighted. Have you finished reading? Because it's important that you do. Let us think, wait for this, okay, that this came from a 14-year-old who had no idea, English wasn't even her first language, who had no idea about what this performance was going to be about. She came with her mother. She had no idea about Turku tribe and its culture. She just arrived. And this is what she thought. And let us then imagine just how far-reaching and impactful impact can come about if we could have more strategic alignment and enhanced recognition of engagement design, which we do not have. Of course, this is not going to solve immediately the land right problem, but we can steer it towards something much bigger than the instant sort of impression or emotional experience. Now, preliminary insights from our research suggest a few directions that demand more attention from us, I think. First is the role of bodily engagement in meaning making beyond the ocular and verbal. And of course, visual perception is so crucial, as evidenced by, say, how media portrayals of refugees as large faceless groups contribute to their dehumanization in the public imagination.
Researchers get their cameras out. Sorry.
Try to remember the rest.
I can share it with you.
Yeah.
And also, Stephanie Dinkins' Secret Garden, of course, a compelling demonstration of how visual and verbal modalities can be harnessed to construct a collective memory space that is both intimate and expansive. So really, I'm not saying let's do less of it. I mean, that would be a bit silly to do that. But for instance, our long prioritizing of the ocular and verbal has facilitated neuroscientific research into neural mirroring and neural coupling. So when you look at it and you kind of mirror empathetically, and also a neuro sort of coupling where you kind of go, that resonates with me, and you follow. It's very valuable, but now with the growing interest and possibilities to engage with other than humans, from algorithmic to multi-species mediators, we have the opportunity to broaden our inquiry into the empathy and resonance, how they might emerge through alternative sensory modalities. Attending to these non-verbal and non-visual channels could reveal new forms of relationalities that we didn't know about. How exciting. And similarly, emerging research invites new approaches to collective effervescence. The heightened sense of energy and connection that arises when we gather around a shared purpose. Even if I go, okay, let's clap together, leave your cameras out. I got you. But even doing this together, we sense a collective effervescence rising. But initially, when Durkheim actually came up with this, he was really saying it's a purely social thing. But emerging research shows, no, it's not. Actually, there are other influences that we can play with, like different non-human actors. So we can think about the spatial agency and how we might design that or collaborate with that in creating immersive environments. So we can work with this. We can be more feral, certainly. Artworks can be more feral, always evolving, updating, and shape-shifting, like the Kiss exhibition. There was a survey, not a retrospective. And so by doing this, really through shape-shifting across contexts, rather than trying to produce the work that remains fixed as a singular, self-contained object, we can sort of bypass that limitation around the availability for access. How can we do that? And I think we should really think about this, rather than trying to produce something that would just travel in the same shape all the time. And Hage dreaming also evolved. It started with the walk through the forest, guided by Dondon. That was it. And it's pretty small, but you can see that really iterated and evolved and shapeshifted through the process. And actually, at the Taiwan Biennial, you can actually see that it was labeled as a research project. But then you saw the snippet of Hage dreaming. That's a completely different work. Shapeshifters. And artists can also be feral, more feral. They are pretty feral usually. Not merely as makers of interactive works, but engaging with what Shuley calls activating practices. One pressing domain in this regard, I think, is accessibility. We just cannot let it go. The mindset of making for whoever can afford it, and whoever can interact with it the way I can imagine, unfortunately, is still prevalent, I think. And this approach is not only ethically untenable, I think it's conceptually impoverished and anachronic, really, to be honest. And what offers a more generative path is to reconceive accessibility. But as what? Any thoughts? I mean, let's think about this together. For instance, how would your audio describe what we saw before? So much happening at the same time, the speed very... I don't know how to do it. Where do we begin and end even? But somebody does it. Obviously, it was done incredibly effectively by expert Alice Gilmore. So on the third night, I actually listened to her words, and it was such a mind-blowing experience just to feel, wow, this is such a wonderfully created artistic experience. It's not better or worse, but it's just a very different experience to the previous 2 nights that I had. And in our interview, this is what Alice said. It is almost like poetry. You write a script of how it looks, and then you pare it back, and you pare it back, and you pare it back, so that you might just slip in 3 words, which hopefully gives them enough information to really understand what's going on. So audio description in this sense can and should be considered as critical as any other elements in this work, what that makes this work, like the sound design, lighting, script writing. We need to reconceive accessibility, certainly not as a constraint, but as a core aesthetic and conceptual element in the poiesis of immersive art, something that shapes its very form, logic, and legibility, which we don't do. So doing so would not only benefit certain audience members, but broader audience, artists, the art form itself, and its ecologies. And looking forward, our research includes engagement mapping and cultural mediation workshops with organizations that curate, develop, and fund immersive art, facilitated by our partner Zemos 98, based in Sevilla, Spain, looking at institutional infrastructure supporting transformative practices. And that's on the right side. On the left, or the interaction side, we're planning a small study on collective non-visual, non-verbal interaction, experimenting with infrasonic vibration and heat in experiencing sonic art in the sauna environment. Overall, we are aiming to engage in broader dialogues on immersive art's feral futures amidst broader critical technosocial transformations, hopes, complexities, real concerns, which is signaled here also by Pierre Wig's new work, The Feral. I don't know if anyone's familiar with this. 1,000-year-long film in an actual site. It's a shame that you probably can't see how it sort of... But you can look it up. And this is the moment, if you like, to take a photo. But this is a new form of immersive art. Really immersive art living there as a living being with AI, as with algorithmic creatures, multi-species, over generations, through artistic engagement. So our project is a small starting point for us to imagine what may be possible through new collaborations, hopefully with people in Bristol. I've met really wonderful people. And in the meantime, why not complete a questionnaire? A true researcher coming out of me. Actually, this is designed for immediate and evolving impact also. This is based on research, which is how, as humans, we are found to experience awe as we listen to others' stories of awe. So you will see, if you follow the link, you can fill out a questionnaire, but you can also see fragments of awe experiences that people have shared. So let's do that, and thank you very much.
Wow. I mean, really awesome work. Corny but true. I mean, really, I mean, impressive in its scale, you know, in its depth. I just love the idea that awe emerged from that previous Creatures project as this kind of, you know, pivot point that you found that you could use to explore some of these questions. So many things to think about this. I mean, I kept putting down points for my questions, and then you would beautifully look at them in the next part of your presentation. But one I'd like to just dwell on a little more is this business about how we research creative projects beyond words, beyond questionnaires, beyond, I mean, that quote from that young woman, I'm not sure where that was, the Hage Dreaming, was absolutely extraordinary. But not everyone feels they can speak about these experiences. So I just wondered if you could take that apart a little bit. Give us any examples of kind of more playful approaches that you've used at times, or, you know, other ways you've come at that.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few things, so many things that we can also explore. But to start with, non-sort of Western canon of knowledge, I mean, you know, embodied knowledge, and that has been part of other cultures for so long, and we can learn from them, not to extract it and use it, but we can learn from it. And also, artistic research has been going on forever, but recent years, especially in Europe and UK, also actually across the world, artistic research suddenly re-emerged as something that, oh, wow, we should look at this, but it has been going on. But we didn't actually look into it. And that is what is happening more these days, and I really am hopeful about it. So let's not mess it up, everybody. Let's do this together. And we can learn from a lot of participatory and co-creative methods, but also other than human communications, like, you know, we can do this, but also we have to challenge, and that takes a lot of effort. And if you read that entanglement paper that I co-wrote, there is a part about how it was a Horizon project. So every time there's an annual sort of review, and we were really, it was not a pleasant experience, let's say. As in, what is this? The problem there was the reviewer wanted art to be, or creative practice to be, a translation tool, and speak the scientific language to explain what is happening. So that is actually up to us to fight over and over again by writing papers, by giving talks, but also actively engaging members of the public through engagement design also. I think that's one way of really addressing it. It's not fast, but we will make changes through it, I think.
Okay. I'm just going to do a little personal kind of question before I open to others, which is, I was fascinated to find myself in your research in the respect that when you spoke about the psychological work that's shown that awe is a kind of feature of childhood experiences, well, we'd all noticed that it subsides and then it re-emerges. And awe has been re-emerging in my life of late. And awe in nature in particular. I mean, really, every spring now I'm like, what the hell is this? This world that regenerates itself, you know, that doesn't leave a mess, that can, you know. And I've been thinking that awe was about my climate grief. But actually now I realise that, you know, it's kind of overdetermined. It's both an age thing, because absolutely I'm thinking much more about mortality now, but also the climate grief thing. And it kind of made me wonder about, you know, how the kind of cultural mediation with the kind of intrinsic sort of psychology. And I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you're thinking about that, and whether climate grief, climate change and challenging that is one of your kind of key underlying themes.
So talk about specifically...
Well, I mean, really, maybe through a particular project that you've researched, or, you know, a particular artistic project you've been involved in, or, you know, so yes, sorry, it was a vague question. But I think you had that kind of point too about cultural mediation being one. Yeah, so I just wondered, if you could.
Cultural mediation, I think, let's talk about cultural mediation, because it is really gaining interest across different sectors, as I mentioned, especially governance and art and culture sectors. That's what we're trying to do, also theorize this practice, which hasn't really been theorized in this context. So it could take place on multiple scales. cultural mediation practice could actually be a form of design engagement activity. Like participatory workshop could be a form of cultural mediation. But what we are trying to do is to actually look at all of that and not be restricted in case by cases sort of situation, but at a systemic level, how we can bring about change by involving. So, example would be, oh yeah, this actually came up during research, but AI. Oh, our local government said our museum has to involve something AI, because that's what we need to do right now. And that has been always the case. And also climate imaginaries, the climate change, that in also many cases come from top down. You have to address this issue somehow, only find works around that. But through cultural mediation over a process, really what we could do is to make that a more sort of synergistic and interactive or dialogic process. So by looking at these children working with keycaps, and then through that, what the Museum Haus der Kunst needed to do was to contact the schools, contact an artist who could do upcycle workshops, and engage with communities and their interest to come up with their workshop. It could come from the waste issue and actually inform local council, yes, but waste issues is something that our community members are really concerned about. So then we can find a sort of intersection between those two. And that also applies to not only the impact, but awe as a complex emotion. We don't have to address one thing as a grief. Grief is also the vastness of this, oh no, it could be the end of the world. What do? We could lose hope. But also we could work with other dimensions of awe to address this issue or allow or help people approach it in different ways. So that would be my sort of long-winded response to your question.
Really interesting. Okay, so I'm wondering if anybody in this room has a question for Jaz. Yeah, hands going up in the front row. Michelle.
I guess,
Please do speak. Mike, so the people online.
I guess my thought about this, even since yesterday, was I worry a little bit about awe-inspiring experiences, creating them, because I wonder if that's not a way to, I mean, not that I think it's bad, awe is important. I experience it all the time in my own life, more for architecture, this kind of thing is often the way that I experience it. But I wonder, the downside of that is to decrease, like if you keep people in a persistent state of awe, does that not decrease critical thinking, which I also think, or the critical approach to life, which is sometimes, you're a little bit blasé about beautiful things in order to think critically, I think, from time to time. At least my experience in my life has been that. And I can overlook beauty in the pursuit of understanding or to accomplish something, to understand how to navigate awe, maybe. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I'm not going to live 1,000 years like Pierre wants me to. No, he doesn't actually. No, that's not what the project is about. It was a bad joke, sorry. But it's not like we're going to reach the upper limit of awe or how we understand beauty before our life ends. Also, and I don't think that wouldn't be my approach to awe or beauty or my capacity. And it's not going to be this. I mean, the problem with awe, with immersive art, for instance, would be the focus on technological sort of, spectacularization, because that actually does evoke awe. You go, oh, wow, but that dies out very quickly. I think maybe that's what you also could think of in terms of, okay, runs out, so what? But that shouldn't be the focus of awe, but awe could be, like artworks, shape-shift, and it sort of emerges in different forms, affecting us in different ways. It's a very complex thing, not a simple thing as, there are 8 categories, did you tick all of them, and that's done. And the growing research, especially by Daka Keltner, who has really been leading this awe research from San Francisco. There's educational programs that they're developing, because we forget, as I said, how to notice awe for most of our lives. So, Noni, did you want to actually say something about that?
Well, I just want to say that I love this exploration of awe right now going on. We're trying to create we have a whole series we're creating called City of Awe. And Dr. Keltner, one of the things that I have in opposition to the way he's describing awe is he will describe awe also as an experience around a demagogue. Why do people, when they're listening to Trump and the seized audience, have an awe-filled spirit? And I think that we should reclaim the space and deny that as a definition of awe. I'm trying to turn it actually into the idea of everyday awe. And that's what you're describing. Like, how do we help people connect with that? And it doesn't have to be a permanent state. It's any more than being hungry is. But it should be something that we should integrate more to uplift and have some spirit. I think Doc's really interesting and a really smart person. I've been lucky enough to hang out with him a little bit. But this is some place where I would want us to take it back as artists, and I love that you're trying to do that.
Can I actually comment on that? Because we had this conversation yesterday. Why awe? And how it evolved from the Creatures Project. Creatures Project was really dear to me, and we did a lot of good things and could have done better in some ways also. But one thing that really I don't think we did as much as I would have liked was this power of art and creative practice and this sensuous and aesthetic and affective impact of relations we build with art. They're really ineffable. And that all sort of addresses awe. But if we said, we're going to look at the sublime, it's like, yeah, there's a philosophy, read a book, But, well, then I'm going to sound really, okay. But when scientists say, there's this awe, it has really positive impact on well-being and all this society is great, it does reach more people. And they go, oh, really? And so by integrating awe or centering awe in this case, that's what I'm trying to do, actually bring more people in rather than carve out, this is what you're not wanting to talk about, but let's talk about it. So that's something that I think I'd like to talk about also. Yeah.
So Paul, I'll take your question and then we're going to go to take online questions, yeah?
Yeah, thanks a lot. I find the Creatures Project really inspiring, and yeah, really good to hear a kind of case for art thinking today. But why immersive art? That's I guess my question is looking at the immersive art for societal transformation. We've kind of read critiques of spectacle. We've read critiques of empathy or claims made for empathy. For you, is there something specific about these emerging forms, about immersive art forms that can lead to transformative change or to, I guess, pro-social or pro-environmental behaviors? Yeah, so why immersive art?
That's where the money is? No, I'm joking. I'm joking. In the previous slide also, I talked about how, especially with this more than human interest, both algorithmic and multi-species mediators, and there's more interest and engagement in that space. And that opens up a lot more opportunities for us beyond the sort of verbal and ocular too. In our general awe questionnaire, a lot of people mention Rothko as inspiring awe. But that's very different to, say, mycelium making sound with me and performing with me together. And there's more and more of that, new forms of art. And we can give it different names. But for me, immersive art is not also just about VR, AR, XR, which is conventionally sort of affiliated with the term, but multisensory, embodied, enveloping type of work. And those works are growing in numbers and interest is growing, and it opens new possibilities for us to relate with one another and the world. And that's why I think it holds such potential for transformation.
Thanks.
Okay, so let's have a couple of questions from online.
Hi, right. So I've got a kind of couple questions. So you alluded to how awe is overwhelming, disempowering, commoditized, but you also suggested that it can be remediated as a democratic force for autonomous collective action. How is this possible? Or, to put it differently, what does it take to turn awe into an activating force? is it about follow-up after the initial artistic experience?
What's the last bit, sorry?
Or to put it differently, what does it take to turn awe into an activating force? Is it about follow-up after the initial artistic experience?
Awe happens all the time, I think, and it's always activating something. You know, that's why it's called awe. It's a very fundamentally transformative emotion. I'm just going to stand up, sorry. But you're absolutely right. And I think it's so important to experience awe within immersive art. But then it's particularly relevant for immersive art because engagement design, that's what you're also referring to, I think, after exiting the work, which can be a jarring experience with immersive art, especially when you sort of exit the work and the experience has been particularly sort of personal and unique. So where do we go from there? And through engagement design, like the workshops or the panel discussion or even questionnaire that ask you about your awe experience, really kind of reenact that sort of awe experience, but in a different way. So awe is not just one in immersive art and then kind of let's go, but we can enact awe at different points. And that's where I think coordinated effort into engagement design as a field of practice, and also we need to theorize about this too, and most importantly, support it and recognize it, that yes, that's where we can really amplify and extend awe for positive transformation. Does that answer your question?
This is an online question.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, okay.
We won't know, but I think it was a great response to the question. Have you got anything else there?
We haven't. I'll probably find out in 5 or 10 seconds.
Okay, cool. Okay. Well, Okay.
No? No? Oh.
Okay.
Hi, yeah, thank you for the talk. I was just wondering about the accessibility, and you were talking, and I don't know if you deliberately put it immediately after talking about shape-changing these experiences, but I wondered if you looked into or discovered anything about how, like, focusing on that audio, like, you know, the beautiful audio description helped to shape-change that performance in a new way and how that could be developed further.
Well, I'm not an expert actually in accessibility, but it was a shock to me, just listening to it and what was being said. And to me, it created a completely different artistic experience as an audience member. So that was me, personal, transformative sort of experience. But what I was suggesting is, why is this an afterthought also? And we also have things like touch tours, you know, and Alice was telling me what kind of difference that makes to sort of feel, this is the space where things happen. Oh, this is the texture. And that, if we bring that already right from the beginning in developing the work, and if you didn't at this point, there's a next, if we shapeshift, there's a next version. And there we could really put it at the center and go, wow, what about this poetic expression? 3 words. How do we actually integrate it, as an example? Or vibration. How do we actually use this as a means of communication? Things like this. So for me, that's shapeshifting and accessibility and centering it, not as an afterthought, but right from the beginning, and how important it is. It has to be the central element of the whole immersive art.
Thank you.
So on the dot of 2 o'clock, we're going to wind up, and I just want to say a huge thank you for being here, and also that there is such alignment between your interests and interests in, you know, here in the studio, many people here in the studio. So I'm hoping this is the start of a conversation rather than goodbye. So thank you so much, Jaz.
Thank you so much.
Cool. So if anyone wants to stick around on Hot Desk for the rest of the day, you're welcome to. Come and find me or one of the studio team, say hello. Yeah, one of us can direct you to the desk, or if you just want to stick around and chat and ask Jaz any questions, then let us know. But yeah, thanks. See you later.